Well, greetings, comrades, and welcome to our usual class for our reading and discussion platform for Pan-African reading. We are reading the book Defeating Dictators by Dr. George Iti. And from today, we'll continue from where we left it in last week, and we'll see what we'll do by end of our session today. So we are going to check on institutional checks still. We are left with the institutional checks against despots and I think empires. So welcome, and as usual, Sister Tapua, are you ready there to read for us?
Yes, I'll read.
Please do.
Right. Institutional checks against despotic kings. As we saw in the previous chapter, very few kings in traditional societies have had absolute power. The exceptions include the monarchs of the Middle East and the pharaohs of ancient Egypt, who were regarded as living gods. It may be suspected that divine kinship and the panoply of government would tend to authoritarianism, but several institutions have militated against this in African states. First, African kings played an insignificant political role in government. Their traditional role was spiritual. Second, they were not only enclosed in their palaces, but also cocooned in a web of taboos. Third, most of the king's powers were delegated to subordinate chiefs under him. As anthropologist Paul Bohannan says, almost all African kingdoms have institutionalized means to keep the ruler from abusing his power. Scholar James Vaughan notes, quotation, "In many instances, the independence upon the rule of law and a respect for law seems to have inhibited ambitious rulers. Nor should it be forgotten that regicide itself was an absolute check upon the excesses of kings." Close quotation. Since the abolition of regicide, kings are simply dethroned. The Oba Samuel Adiriyi Adara of the Ekiti community of Ekiti state in Nigeria was dethroned for not contributing enough to the development of his community. Unable to answer the charge at a meeting, he was asked to vacate the throne to allow a more progressive-minded person to occupy it. Yes. Whilst the meeting was still ongoing, some youths in the town invaded the venue, removed the dress of the traditional ruler, including his royal beads and crown, and chased him out of town. Shortly after, traditional trees in strategic shrines were cut down, symbolizing the demise of the Oba. The spokesman for the community said it was the collective decision of both the old and young to dethrone the monarch, saying his reign was, quotation marks, disastrous, woeful, and sorrowful. Should I continue?
No, thank you. Thank you for Sister Tapua. Let's look at that again. We spent maybe 2 minutes per each person to go through it. I can reread it because it's a short sentence, but after that maybe members can, we can have 2 minutes each or 3 to share what we think about this, and then we continue to the next one. So we are looking at institutional checks against despots. We started some times back with institutional checks against the chief, And in fact, the chief had various institutional checks. The first one we discussed on institutional checks were there were religious and supernatural sanctions about the despots, if you can remember. And here we said that a bad chief could even, the corpse of a bad chief was dragged along the ground and it was being mocked by the people who hated him. There were also private and public means where the community that felt not happy with the king could then leave the space and go move somewhere else. But the king was always reminded that actually he had the responsibility and he was reminded about the oath of office. This was a way to keep them away from actually being dictators. We also saw very well that there was an institutional state checks on the key chiefs, and this was not the royal family. So the mother or the queen of the clan mother was also having the responsibility to actually ensure that the king do not become or the chief do not become dictator or despot. And if she fails in her responsibility, we're told that the royal family or her royal highness in that case, if she failed, she could be scolded, reprimanded, or rebuked. She could rebuke an errant chief, but if she fails in her duty, she could also be disposed from the tribal system. She could also be sent away as the royal queen. But also there was an inner council of advisors who were also actually advising the king and ensuring that the chief in this case, for example, do not become a despot. There were council of elders, another layer, that was also to keep the chief on spot. And finally, there was the people. So the last defense was the people. And they said that if the king continues to be, the chief continues to be dictator, people will take the exit option. And nobody could stop them. They could walk away. If you feel that the leadership is more despotic, you walk away. So we won't stay under your despotism for long. And now today we are looking at the kings. And we are told that the exceptions, they say that as we saw in the previous chapter, very few kings in traditional society had an absolute power. Like what we have some presidents today have absolute power. The exception include the monarchs of the Middle East and the pharaohs of the ancient Egypt, who are regarded as living gods. Very interesting that regards. It may be suspected that divine kingship and the panoply of government will tend to authoritarianism, but several institutions have militated against this in African states. So you give an example that for African kings, they played insignificant political roles in government. The kings played insignificant role. The traditional role was spiritual. Second, they were not only enclosed in their places, but also cocooned in a web of taboos. And third, most of the king's powers were delegated to subordinate chiefs under him. As anthropologists, we are told, he said that almost all African kingdoms have institutional means to keep their rulers from abusing this power. In many instances, the dependence upon the rule of law and the respect for law seem to have inhibited ambitious rulers. And nor should it be forgotten that regicide itself was an ultimate check upon the excesses of the king. So since the abolition of the regicide, the kings are simply dethroned. We are given an example of the Oba or of the Ode Ekiti community. I think Angela is here with us. He can tell us the Ekiti state in Nigeria. And he was dethroned for not contributing enough to the development of his community. When he was unable to answer the charges at a meeting, he was asked to vacate the throne to allow more progressive people to occupy it. So these are examples of what happened. And you see what the youth did. In fact, like the quote that has been said here, that the spokesperson for the community said, it was collective decision of both the old and the young to dethrone a monarch. So I would really be interested to hear what do we have, some of us, in regards to that text alone. Share with us your thinking in 2 minutes, and then we can go to the next text. So who is ready to go first? Sister Tapo, do you want to say something?
Yes, what struck me was, I think that comment about Africans. Okay, I think it's the second or third sentence there. Right. It may, I think it's the fifth line. It may be suspected that divine kingship and the panoply of government would tend to authoritarianism, but several institutions have militated against this in African states. My interest is in African states, looking at what we have today and the tendency, which I think, I mean, it's my opinion, that African leaders tend towards being authoritarian and despotic. They almost behave like kings and are trying to establish hereditary lineages of rulers between them. So is this because of the juxtaposition that we have between the Western way of doing things and then the traditional way? Because if we were in a position that we could actually say we had ways to make sure that the king's position or the leader's position was symbolic, why is this not happening today? Because I think I'm coming back to my contribution last week where I actually thought we need to move out of the Eurocentric way of government and revert back to our traditional communalistic representation. Then I think we'll get more done in our communities than currently. That's my comment for now.
Thank you. Sawindok? Sawindok, what do you think?
I'm half concentrating, just mostly listening. I'm driving, man.
Okay.
Okay.
It's all right.
That's noted. Is there anyone? I know most of the people who have joined us either joined late or they have joined us for the first time. And welcome, Brother Anjola.
Hi,
Welcome, General
Brother
Munaki.
Pigby.
Hi, Brother
Hi, Brother.
Anjola.
Okay, I'll just say something. Please correct me if I'm in line or not.
Okay, go
So
ahead.
the first thing I would like to say about African kings is we need to understand the position of the African kings with the institutional development in terms of the relationship between our traditional rulers and the people in government. I would also like to, I would also like to acquire because I'll use the recent activity that the president of Burkina Faso just did, where he went to greet traditional kings in different lands and also met with chiefs on different walkways that he attended. It is very important to realize that while the African youth contribute to most of the community issues that happens on our continent, we cannot we cannot say that the thing should be fully involved if there are no chapters of how the power is being shared. Every king in Africa has something that they are meant to bring to different communities. So we need to first of all understand that we're not we're not creating an act of nepotism. We're not creating an act of being biased. We're also not creating an act of enclosing to one community, thinking that because of the culture between the Yoruba and the Ekiti people is, for example, because of that, will not be able to contribute to different things. Different people have different things that they are meant to offer the whole country and different parts of their tradition. So, firstly, I think we have to know how power is being shared. We need to know who is involved, and we also need to know what role exactly are they playing in terms of developing people and also creating more opportunity for education to thrive from both the crèche and to the higher institutional level, which was one thing I think we have to commend because whether they are migrating to a particular African country or they are from the African country, the culture of love, unity, and also being diplomatic when you're building relationships matters a lot. And while we try to welcome people that migrating to our country, we need to also make them understand the meaning of unity, and also making them understand, giving them some ideas of certain kings that have been in our community and what they should expect. These are some of the things that should be from our institutional checks, which additionally I would say most international airports and local airports are part of the institutional checks that are currently in Africa, that play a role to making sure that we reduce any deposited kings that are happening across the continent. Thank you.
Thank you. And can you comment about these Ekiti people? Do you know about them?
Them. So Ekiti State in Nigeria is one of the middle class states for the country, and this particular matter was done by the immediate past governor of Ekiti State, that's Dr. Kayode Fayemi, who happened to be a minister in General Buhari's government. So this was more of hunger, and also Ekiti, they had a lot of people from Ekiti State going to the capital to beg for food, to beg for different shelters for them to survive. So when this happens, the Adara was not responding, and actually the chief that he put on this particular project embezzled some of the money that was meant for the community. So this was supposed to be a planned coup, but because of the issues that were within the whole thing, and the level of diplomatic by the then ex-vice president, that's Professor Shibaju, that was where the talks had to go on, and this was where the governor had to remove him, and he has been currently replaced today.
Okay, thank you.
So Ekiti State is different from the popular Yoruba culture, but it's still under Southwest in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you. Sister Chisoma?
Oh, hello. Came in late. So I'm assuming what I'm going to comment on is what you were discussing. So, yeah, about chiefs and kings, and like I said last time, we don't have kings and queens. It's just chiefs and the ministers and whoever above the chiefs. No respect to anything. But then we see the situation in Burkina Faso. Recently, I've heard people argue, saying he's a dictator. He's a dictator because he's not holding elections. But then some are arguing that he's not holding elections because of security issues. So, like somebody's just mentioned here, he's working with chiefs, he's visiting the chiefs, he respects them, he consults them, and he's obviously, I'm assuming, working with them. So, as I've always argued, I can only speak for my country. These elections, these political parties are really causing us serious problems. Every time we go to election, we're digging ourselves deeper into the hole. It just gets more and more chaotic and disorganized, and divisions, more and more divisions. So I find the way Traore is doing it, although I haven't heard why he's taken that structure. And from what I heard, he was 34. I don't know what their constitution says about presidents being under 35. And also that he was only a captain, lower than all the other ranks that could have taken the position. So I don't know whether that's anything to do with it, or he's got other plans, or whether he feels, that's my observation too, that he feels things are better managed that way, with him in control. Although people are saying, like I said, he's a dictator, he's just making the decisions, he's taking the law into his hands, blah, blah, blah. So like as Tatapua is saying, can we go back to the old tradition, which is something similar with what is happening in Burkina Faso, although I don't have the full details because The social media is saying a lot of things to hype him up, and which is good. Our own propaganda. That's what the West does. It writes its own propaganda to suit themselves. And it's all imaginary, and it's imaginary about us, it's imaginary about them. So this time we've taken control in imagining how we'd like Africa to be. So I don't know whether that's what you were discussing, but I just feel the model Traore is running at the moment is working, and maybe that's why it's working, because he's the only one there. I suppose he's got other people he's working with, but he hasn't. And other people were arguing, but he can't hold elections because he's got no opposition. He's got no opposition. I don't know what they understand by opposition. I suppose they mean a party that's opposing him, a political party that's opposing him. But we hear about all these other people who have fled to other countries to start causing him problems with the West. So yeah, I think it works better than all these divisions that we're creating, trying to be a democratic whatever. At the moment, we've got 19 people trying to presidential candidates. So how does that work? That's splitting all the votes, and then we'll have a second election as if we've got any money to do it. I don't know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sister Tapua. Sister Tapua.
Yes.
Hello, can you? Yeah, I request that you read for us the institutional against.
Yes,
I request that you read for us the institutional checks against imperial rule and the summary of this so that we can discuss them then together. For the benefit of those who have joined us now, what we do, we read the text, then we ask you to share with us your thinking. So please go ahead, Sister Tapua.
All right. Institutional checks against imperial rule. As we saw in the previous chapter, many empires in ancient and medieval times were actually confederacies in which tyrannical rule was not a possibility, as, by definition, a confederacy is a voluntary association. Imperialism implies aggression against other tribes or ethnic groups and involves coercion or the application of force. Therefore, the term is not applicable to voluntary associations or to one's own people. Imperial rule proper was of two types, indirect and direct rule. The indirect rule was generally less harsh. Subjugated groups were allowed to keep their customs and religion and governed themselves as before, as long as they were willing to pay tribute. The ancient Persian Empire was of this variety. In the case of direct rule, there were a number of factors that inhibited harsh rule and rigid central control. The first was, of course, the language barrier. This difficulty constrained rapid assimilation of the subjugated group. The second factor was the fact that lines of authority in indigenous societies were based upon kinship and ancestral connections. It was difficult to supplant these and substitute authority from imperial officers who lacked kinship relations and thus legitimacy or authority. The third check was geographical. In ancient and medieval times, continents were sparsely populated. Ethnic groups that found themselves under alien tyranny always moved into the great expanse of unoccupied land to uphold their independence and protect their cultures. The fourth check against imperialism was logistical. Despotism necessitated the possession of efficient population control instruments. These were unavailable due to the underdeveloped state of technology, transportation, and communication networks in the early days. When a subjugated people on the outer reaches of an empire broke away, it often took several weeks for the information to reach the capital. Talking drums reduced the informational lag somewhat, but not by much. In the 7th and 8th centuries, the main weapons in traditional societies were the bow and arrow or the spear, which everybody could make. They were, in that sense, democratic weapons. No man could be a despot for long, especially where the technology was relatively primitive. It was only in the latter part of the last century, after the introduction of guns, that the Kabaka of Buganda had even a small standing army. Most societies that had standing armies disbanded them after a war or had them cultivate food to feed themselves so that the armies did not become a drain on traditional treasuries or terrorize the people. In fact, P.T. Bauer put it succinctly, quotation, "Despotism and kleptocracy do not inhere in the nature or do not incur in the nature of African cultures or in the African character, but they are now rife in what was called British colonial Africa, notably West Africa," close quotation. Analysts would probably do well to look for the causes of despotism and kleptocracy elsewhere than in indigenous African culture and character. Very few African empires had rigidly centralized administrations. Historical evidence suggests that those empires that were characterized by strong, centralized administrations were inherently unstable and chronically threatened by internal revolts. Although a superior military might have kept rebellious vassals states in check, it was only a matter of time before the subjugated states successfully asserted their independence or bolted for freedom. In fact, the traditional African political system was fundamentally and structurally anti-empire. According to sociologist Chancellor Williams, quotation, "The very circumstances of the endless process of segmentation, of forever splintering off to form small independent mini-states, developed a built-in factor of disunity, reinforced by the attending growth of different languages. Self-government or chiefdom was the inevitable way of life, not a theory," close quotation. The cultural imperative was independence, and the assertion of the central control often led to rebellions and the breakup of kingdoms and empires. Economic historian Peter Wickens is empathic in his conclusions, quotation, "Strong centralized government was the exception rather than the rule in sub-Saharan Africa. Poverty of communication made it difficult to prevent states from breaking up. Secondly, even relatively wealthy rulers like the Mwene Mutapa could not maintain a professional army of any size to enforce commands. Executive weakness and bad communication, together with total or general illiteracy, necessitated devolution of powers of administration, either to appointed officials or to subordinate rulers.
Kindly read for us the summary, then we discuss all of it.
Okay. I don't have it on my screen. Can you help me get it, please? Yes, thank you. Summary. Painstaking efforts, though not conclusive, have been made here in the preceding chapter to demonstrate that despotism is not an integral feature of indigenous political systems. These systems were based upon kingship, consultation, and consensus building. Despotism, of course, was also a theoretical possibility, but it seems that after encountering it, measures were put in place to prevent its reoccurrence. Rulers were certainly not elected by ballot, but were chosen by a clan mother, a queen mother of a royal family, or a council of elders. Those who chose the ruler also had the power to remove him. Further, as noted earlier, the rulers were cocooned in webs of taboos and injunctions, a breach of any of which could result in removal from office. The very possibility of despotism in itself served as a deterrent to autocracy. In addition, the rulers were surrounded with councils upon councils, without which they could not initiate any action or laws. Nor did the rulers have instruments of coercion, military and police forces, under their permanent control to enforce any diktats. It did not make sense for a ruler to brutalize and oppress his own people. He would be decapitating his own tribe for the benefit of a stronger neighbor. And even if he did, clan leaders would rise up against him. The people always had the final say, the exit option. A ruthless ruler simply found themselves abandoned. This discussion naturally begs the question, why has despotism become rife in the developing world in modern times? We now turn to this question.
Thank you. Thank you for that reading. It's very extensive and very heavy. But I think we are arriving at a summary that's also guiding us. So we'll allow members to go ahead, and actually I request that you share your thinking in regards to what has been read. What do you think? What do you want to add on? What do you want to contribute to in regards to what you've read until the summary part of it? Then we can go ahead maybe with what the real causes of despotism in modern time later. So I'll start now, and each has actually 2 minutes to do so. So please, who is ready to go first? You can share what do you think, what have you learned, and what do you want to say in regards to what you have all read so far in this text that has been read by Sister Tapua. Let me see. And welcome new members who have joined us. Yes, Sister Tapua, you can.
Yes. Reading this has just left me with a sense, I'm feeling bereft, because it looks like as Africans, we had systems that worked for us. We had systems that mitigated against despotism and all that. And then we were introduced to a system that we can't relate to at all. I mean, I know people talk about democracy, but democracy does not work for us because of the nature of how we were before, where we had systems and taboos and religion and everything that controlled the person who was supposed to be king, and they were only supposed to be king in a symbolic manner. Otherwise, the youth and the elders agreed on what was going to happen, which is not what is happening today. Because I'm thinking of the Kenya situation where the youth have to rise, of the African situation where the youth has to rise almost as if it's against their elders. And the elders don't know what to do with a woke youth. I think it's a sad situation, which is why I'm always thinking, can we not Sankofa and then try to find our way forward? Because if we're talking about governance, what are we talking about? We're talking about developing people. We're talking about advancing people. We're talking about protecting people's way of life. We're talking about development. Could we not do it another way? Because this one is not working. Our leaders are really running away with corruption, with fiddling, with stealing, with thinking about themselves. And in the Zimbabwean situation, it's really sad, absolutely sad, because if we had the power before to remove a king and to have the people to remove the king, we didn't have to wait five years to remove the king. We had other means of doing it. When one country reports of corruption or some suspected multi-million corruption that is coming to the open, and one African state is trying to advise another one, and they ignore it. And we're left with no way of dealing with them because we don't understand this whole system, and it just drags us and drags us. I'm not sure what the way forward should be, because the people who are taking advantage of the system like the system as it is, because then they can do whatever they want with us. And we don't have armies, we don't have guns. We need to find a way. I think I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sister Tapua, for sharing your thinking with us. Let's get to any person who want to go next. Any person who want to share what they think, what they understand. Sawindok?
Yeah, let me just add something to what Sister Tapua has said. We cannot keep our rulers in check because we do not have the coercive instruments or institutions, if you like. Like she said, we don't have guns, we don't control the army, we don't control the police. So, as was said already in the text, coercive institutions are not in our hands, and despotic rulers and tyrants and these guys are running free without our checks. I thank you.
Thank you. Angela?
Okay, hi. Hello. So my thoughts on this is we need to firstly understand where we are. We need to understand what the government looks like. Then we need to also understand that before the current king came in, what are the real issues that have been facing both in the colonial era and the modern era. We need to make a comparison. We also need to understand that as security, do they understand that the current ruler has a process and has a system of why he's an instrument to a particular process? Because if we don't make a security understand who the ruler is, it will be very difficult for him to be able to promote, to give liberation to the people in the society. So it is not about being one man, but it's about how we can avoid despotism in these modern times, that the common issues that have been happening in the colonial era will not be coming again in the current will not be coming to us in these modern times as a form of being an imperialist who is always responding to whatever everybody has to say in the common era, which will help us, which will have to say us like a clan, or they might not be understanding what kind of rulers that we have or what kind of families we are coming from. Thank you.
Thank you, Geronunaki.
Yes, my lord. Yes, sir. My brother and family, give thanks again and again for this great session. For me, it's just an enjoyment for me because basically, these are basically the structures of our ancient ancestors who came here on earth. This is how they structured the societies in an orderly and in an ethical manner. Because more especially in that first paragraph, the upper paragraphs, where they talk about there used to be divine kings and queens. So those words, those divine kings and queens that used to rule Africa prior to the kings and queens we know normally today and in the past 100 years are not the same. Those divine kings and queens they are talking about that ruled Africa about 20,000 years ago, 30,000, even more. Those are actually the Anunnaki we are talking about. Those are the ancestors who came from the other planet in their physical form because they had a lifespan of more than 10,000 years. They didn't have a lifespan that we have now of 120 years. They had far superior lifespans. Each king could rule about 5,000 years. That's one physical body without experiencing death. So I actually love the fact that this writer, he knew this knowledge and he actually wrote it down. So it comes to say that these things is hereditically. This is our heritage. We've inherited that. We are they call us Gen Z, but actually we are the continuation of that order. If you can look at now what's happening in Africa, how is the AES winning the African people? The great Ibrahim Traore and the other two generals, Tiane and Assimi Goïta, have actually approached the traditional leaders, you see, the kings and queens of those areas of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. And they actually came to a consensus, you see. They didn't just start shooting people up, or the way the media is showing it. They actually started approaching the local communities. They had a consensus and they heard the cries of the people that it's common. They are crying to liberate. And then after they got the support of the communities in the AES area, that's when they started to initiate the coups. So that's why even now AES has that VTF, which is that army that is based on the locals, you see, which is the ethnic locals of the certain areas. If maybe that certain area has maybe, I'll make an example, Fulani people there, then the army of Burkina Faso, talk about the government will actually go to that area, train the boys of the Fulani into men, arm them. And then when the terrorists come that side, they will be able to defend themselves. And also they will be able to ask for reinforcements from the central government. So Traore understands this thing that we are talking about here. That's how I see it actually. So basically that's what I wanted to say on my thoughts, that this is a continuation of what we as Africans always had. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Chisomo.
Hello. Yeah. And I was just thinking, when I was growing up, our village, I don't know whether it was near because we had a car, but anyway, it felt very near. So almost every weekend, my dad took us to the village. We'd spend the weekend there, come back. So we kind of understood what's in the area and how the area works and how the people work and things like that. And also, like I say, like I've always said, in Malawi, our chiefs do not live luxury lives. They just live ordinary life, like any villager you would see in the village, poor, 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 with a grass thatched house, mud house, and because in the villages as well, hello, sorry, in the villages as well, we don't use fences, so no fence, no all these wall fences and wire fences. It's just open. People can pass through here, pass through there. There are roads everywhere. So as you're passing through the roads, if you're going past a house, you greet these people. Oh, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. A few questions here, a little discussion. And as you're passing, you also pass through a chief's house. The same thing. It's just he's just a normal person, approachable. You can stop, he can talk to you. You go past his house. So they were very, 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 very accessible. They were very accessible. I remember my son, when we went to the village and he was maybe 2, 3, and they went to play away and then he came back. You could see on his face something has happened. Then he said, oh, we went to Anduna, meaning one of these people. So he was surprised. Coming from town, he's surprised that you can actually go to a house and play with these people and sit with them and just go there. It's nothing scary. It's nothing, you know. So this is how it works in the village. Maybe now it's changed a bit, but it's still the same. We still don't have fences. We don't have. You just walk past everybody, greetings, and you walk. Whereas in town, you have nobody to refer to anything. Even the chief themselves, you have to know the chief very well to be able to speak to him, because he can choose to ignore you. He can choose to charge you. He can choose to, yeah. So it's very, very difficult. When you're in town, everything is down to you. You have nobody to go to, nobody about anything, not even the court, not even nothing. So it's just two separate worlds, two completely separate worlds, alien to each other. And that's when you know that this system is not ours. We're not understanding it. We can't use it. Only the people in those positions can use it to their own advantage. But to the rest of the community, we are living apart. It's two different systems. Then in addition to that, you have the civil service. My observation is that the civil service is worse than a politician. First of all, they're not elected. Secondly, they don't move, they don't shift. They're there forever until the day they decide to leave that position or be upgraded. And they have a very sophisticated system of manipulating everybody, including the politician himself and the president. And when these people come into power, the new government comes into power, they can't do anything about what these civil servants are doing. From my understanding, one president was complaining. She says, so I started. This was when Bingu died, and so the vice president had to step in immediately. So she was saying, so I started. So I'm thinking, okay, so where do I start? Because remember, no handover, nothing. It's just incidental. So where do I start? And I'm thinking, where do I start? Okay. So before I knew it, people are coming to speak to me. They're giving me envelopes. So what is this? Waters and waters of money, meaning this is how we run things. We're going to give you this money. So meaning they can do what the system is, how the system is run by the civil service. So it's the other way around. The politician runs things according to what the civil servants runs it. If they can change swift, I don't think they're able to even change, because nothing has changed. Like I said, to us, changing governments does not mean anything at all, because of these people who are so settled and have changed the whole system. The chiefs don't matter, the politicians don't matter. They work with Asians, they work with all sorts of people, foreigners and whatnot. We had a TV. There's a TV program that comes on Sundays. They call it Hold Current. So they talk about issues. So they were talking about America refusing visas for people.
denigrate.
Hello. They were talking about America refusing visas because Malawi has been complaining. But why are you not giving us visas? They even had to write letters to America to find out why. They wrote letters to the embassy to find out why. Then this television station decided to call the ambassador in the country to come and explain what is going on. So the ambassador comes and he says, "Oh, yeah, we have not been able to process these applications. We get they say we get a note. They get a note from somebody in the government to say, oh, I'm going to America on such and such a meeting or whatever. I need some visas. But when he's going for this meeting, I understand there's some meeting going on at the moment that people are supposed to go to. So when they want to go this meeting, she says, do you remember Mr. So-and-so took 200 people with him? 200. And when they go, they ask for diplomatic passes. So they've got diplomatic passes of diplomatic visas, diplomatic passports. They go and they don't, all 200 never came back. The other one took 45 and they all sought asylum. You've got a diplomatic passport, you're seeking asylum. So stuff like that. There is that system that is controlling everything, and nobody else can do anything about it. It's so sad.
Thank you, Sister Chisomo. And I would like to, at this particular moment, point to some few issues. And thank you for all the members who have shared their thinking in regards to this. Hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, I would like to point a few issues in this summary. One is that despotism, the first island, despotism is not an integral feature of indigenous political system. As much as people said we had kings and whatever chiefs, and they'll say they will rule for sometimes as they say it was not despotic. So one thing that should be very clear that it is not our integral future as indigenous political system. The second thing is that our system was based on consensus building. Consensus building. Today, there's no consensus building. Today is game of numbers, tribal cards, and the rest. The other thing is that even after we encountered despotism, measures were put in place to prevent its reoccurrence. And in fact, it said that those who choose the ruler had also the power to remove the same ruler. And it's something Sister Tapo and Sawindoka said. In this current system you're using, do you really have the power to remove the president? And the answer is, you either wait for 7 years, or 5 years, or 4 years, till the next election. But even those next elections will not prove easy for you to remove the ruler. Because they'll still come back again and they'll want to steal the election to still retain themselves in power. Just like a useless process Museveni has been putting the people of Uganda for years and years, the so-called election, which he can never be removed from. In Kenya, when the constitution says you have the power to recall, but even the process of doing that is impossible. So the people who choose the leaders today do not have power to remove the leader in their so-called democratic process. Another thing that you have to also notice that those rulers were cocooned by way of taboos and injunction. A breach of any of such could result to their removal from office. Today, our leaders do not have even those taboos or injunction. Even where the constitution says how they should act, they still don't act in that manner. And even when they violate it, it's very hard still to remove them from office. In fact, in some countries, people will say the leaders are above the law. But also, we are also told that in the previous centuries, the leaders or the rulers did not have the instruments of coercion. And it's what Brother Sawindok was pointing at. They did not have instrument of coercion. So they did not own any military. They did not own any police force. But today, our rulers of today have instruments of coercion. They have the military, they have the police force under their permanent control. And they are used to enforce their dictates. Another thing that is very interesting, that it did not make sense for the rulers to brutalize and oppress their own people. But today I don't know why they find the sense to kill so many young people in the streets. And it was very clear, if they reduce their number, their neighbors will be stronger than them. And he said that even if they did, clan leaders will rise up against him. If you ask, for example, today, where we have dictatorship, have you ever heard of the elders, the leaders, or the chiefs, the so-called, or the clan leaders coming out even to speak? Do even the older generation, who are of course the age of the so-called leaders, come out vocally to speak? In some unfortunate situations, you find the young people, like in my country, Kenya, giving their life just to speak. And in fact, we are reminded before that when the old day of a Kuti clan messed up, it was the responsibility of the young and the old to overthrow him. But today, the responsibility is not shared. We are lacking somewhere. And I think the elders of our community and the older generation must also know that it's still their responsibility to take care of the state and work together to help correct dictators. Because I believe in a country whereby the elders and the youth are standing against the dictators or the rulers, there's no way the ruler can have a space. So the people always had also the final say. If you are ruling us too much, we will exit and go form our own territory. We cannot be forced to be under your rulership or leadership. The same thing happens today, but in another form. People become refugees, run away from their countries to the next countries. So the question is, a ruthless leader will sometimes find himself abandoned. And the author asks a simple question. Then why has despotism become rife in the developing world in modern times? Why? And this is the question that we will be interested to cover in our next writing that you are going to read. But those are the few summaries that I want to put on. Maybe if somebody still wants to come in with something, maybe I'll give the next 4 to 5 minutes, then we go to the next reading. Anybody want to share something?
If I can, if there's no one else to share, let's just give someone a chance, then I can say something if there's no
Okay,
one.
thank you. Is there anyone who want to share something in regards to the text as well? I know Comrade Hillary has been coming in and leaving, and also welcome new Comrade Maxon. Sister Marlin, you've been here. Do you have to say something?
Peace, yeah. Peace, family. How y'all? How's black
Oh.
man? How black woman? Black queen? Black king? How
Hold
the
on,
black people?
hold on, Brother Sadiki.
Peace, black man. How you been? You good?
Oh, it's been a long time I haven't seen you. I hope you're good where you are.
Yeah. Black man, yeah, but I'm around the first one of the first conquerors over here in America. So, it's questionable if I'm safe or not. You know what I'm saying? All I'm doing is surviving in one of the worst conditions that people can think fathom. You just think we in the best place, even though a lot of us want to run from the continent to here. Uh, I'm surviving, but at the same time, all those who are running, like you saying, that's going the youth who's trying to get out of the way of these dictators. You gotta learn to plant your feet and fight. All those numbers that's going over to these different places to be refugees. They're not fighters. They're afraid of the life, giving their life for what their cause is to live where they are. You know, just too many numbers that's just willing to uplift themselves. Women and children, that's another story. But the women and children can't move like that unless the men are actually carrying them there. The men need to. I'm not advocating, but it's one thing. You know, You got to survive where you are. You got to establish some kind of resistance under those kind of conditions. You can't just keep allowing the dictator to be the dictator without people showing some kind of resistance, you know. And I don't want to go too in depth in it because I don't know who you let access and who was compromised, but that's the reality. Um, as I'm seeing in Burkina Faso, people stand their ground. They stand their ground. Of course, they have a leader to stand their ground for, but at the same time, people got to realize the only way to survive in those kind of and under a dictator is show the dictator that someone's willing to sacrifice themselves to be able to release that pressure and show they have people power. It's in numbers. But as long as you run, he can continue to stay dictator. That's in my opinion.
Thank you, brother. We are good and everything's okay over here. And look forward to see you anytime soon, brother. But stay safe, stay black.
24/7.
Yeah, thanks for coming in.
No doubt.
Anybody else who want to share something before we go to the next reading?
I'd like to share something, please.
Okay, please go ahead.
Right. I think I'm going to start with the fact that I've been thinking, if we go back to being true to ourselves in terms of the institutions that we run and the type of governments that we have, because our constitutions, for example, are constitutions that reflect the colonizers' thoughts and what they think governments should be, and they're far removed from Ubuntu. If we have government and constitutions that primarily focus on the well-being of people and not of the self of the people that are in power, then we can maybe make some headway in terms of making sure that our people are looked after. For example, in that new constitution that I advocate, I would say coups, because coups in quotation marks are not new based on what we have read. They're not new for the African context. They're a means of removing despots. So this is why, for example, as Africans, and particularly as West African, with the examples that we've seen in the text, the Africans are not surprised that Traore is in power, because it is something that has happened before that we expect to happen, that if somebody is not leading for the people, they have to be removed. And they have to be removed because people are working on a consensus. And if people are working in communities, smaller groups that elect their own leaders, it means then we are able to separate the instruments of coercion, armies and police. Those are big. So that if we're talking about a Pan-Africanist point of view, for example, the army would not be under Mnangagwa or not under Ruto. The army would be elsewhere. It would be a contribution by every state in Africa as a country. Therefore, we will be able to build a situation where the people on the ground, the administrators on the ground, are looking after the people and the people's welfare. And something else that makes me really sad is religion, the role of religion. Because if we're saying African leaders were cocooned in webs of taboo and injunction, in other words, you cannot treat another human being, you cannot ill-treat another human being without consequences, spiritual consequences. And besides people removing you from power, you have karma. And today's world, where Christians and Christianity says or you forgive and you be forgiven, and you can always repent before you enter heaven, and nothing will happen. It has really disarmed people in terms of not instilling any sense of fear, because people who get into power in our communities are getting into power for themselves. Because I'm quoting from the text, it did not make sense for a ruler to brutalize and oppress his own people, which is what some of our African leaders are doing. They're brutalizing and oppressing their own people. For whose benefit? For the benefit of the colonial master. And this is why we should not be afraid of getting them off. We should not be afraid of decapitating their tribal, their influence, because they don't care about the people. And then we're also talking about clan leaders could rise against him. We don't have, like my brother said, Big Ben, we have no one to stand up and say. In Zimbabwe, for example, our constitution says we can impeach our president. Everything was put in place to impeach our president. And because the president has the power to dissolve or stop parliament and give it a break, just the weekend when they were supposed to present the impeachment, the president stepped in and stopped parliament. And then they're re-strategizing. They're just about to come back and they're ignoring the impeachment that was supposed to be put on the table. So you see, people have very little recourse. So people need to always have the final say. We have to have the courage to design our own system that works for us and not follow the Western type. Because if we're not being led by Ubuntu, then we have a problem of accumulation. A lot of our dictators have families, and you find that there was a time when I was looking at European leaders where you had Merkel, the German lady, what was her name? Right, and you have a lot of them who were, beg your pardon?
Angela Merkel.
Yes, Angela Merkel, and then in the UK you had the other lady, what's her name? They were all without children. Yes, they were all without children. No. The very recent conservative,
yeah,
who was toppled by Johnson.
Yeah.
Right. There were people without families who are dedicated, like the Catholic Church, people who are dedicated to just service, who don't have anyone to pass an inheritance to. Because what we have is a situation where people want to accumulate and stay in power and make it theirs, when it's supposed to be a community. It's supposed to be helping the community. And it should not be attractive. Being a leader of a country should not be attractive. It should not be seen as a way of accumulating wealth. Thank you. I think I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. We'll have to go ahead a bit. We've been very slow, but we'll have to go ahead a bit. And I want to thank those who have contributed. We'll be looking at this last part. Then from there, we'll be good to go. So we are looking at just that last part. From next time, we'll start on indigenous versus Western institutions. But today, let us look at this last part, and then we will end our reading today by reading this last part. Who is willing to read for us the real causes of despotism in modern time?
Brother BJ.
Yes.
Maybe before we proceed, just one small question.
Okay.
It seems to me there were no provisions. Yeah, in any event, there are nowhere any provisions for a coup d'etat. But it looks like coup d'etats were not so rife in the olden days, because what I hear is like youth standing up, the elders standing up, and the council of whoever standing up against a despot. I think there was no chance for a coup d'etat in the olden days. Or what have you observed?
No, we had the option to exit, but today you have to exit to go where? You deal with it. So dealing with it is probably the element of coup d'etat, because now we cannot exit. It's either you exit, but not as exiting. We are not going to run anymore to go from other territories anywhere anymore. is that you either become a right person or you are the one who should exit. And that's why, as our brother Sadiki has said very well, that men become men enough to stand up, and not only men, even women become women enough to stand up. So unlike those periods where people could exit and go from their own territory, what happened if in the territory you go, somebody become a dictator again, you exit again and continue exiting and exiting and exiting. In this current setup is that men become men enough and they either have the dictator exit rather than the community running away, because at the end of the day, the community comes first. So we cannot leave our country, we cannot just be beggars just for you to continue being there. So it's either Ruto go away or it's either toe the line, but not us running away. That can't happen today.
Yeah. Can I give an example of where it's happening today? We've got Sudan splitting into North Sudan and South Sudan. We've got what's happening in the Horn of Africa in terms of splitting. We have the Afrikaners in South Africa saying they want their own country. We have people of Ndebele descent here being disallowed from electing their own king, and they're saying we want to split. So there is that sense of people wanting to split, but there's nowhere to go, but they want to break away, and it destabilizes the whole
Yeah,
system.
it was to happen in Kenya in 2017 when Raila Odinga lost the election. He actually saw himself as a people's president in Kenya in 2018, and they threatened the central government that if the central government do not listen to them, they're going to split the country and have their own people. And again, that is not a solution to despotism. Because if you split your country and form a small country like South Sudan, dictatorship never ends even in South Sudan. South Sudan will continue again and splitting. And probably this might be the reasons how Africa ended up, even before the Berlin Wall came in and disputing us into countries. Probably our community were splitting and exiting from where was our original setup. So we ended up splitting, moving. You find this a dictator, you move down there, you move until you find yourself in South Africa. You move until you find yourself in West Africa. You move until you find yourself in East Africa. You see? But of course, by that time, we are also told, you remember where we read here that the instrument for power, actually by then, because we never had guns, so the instrument for coercion was in everybody's hand. So there is nobody who could actually coerce you, because nobody had a gun, and everybody could make whatever it requires to make. So everybody could make the spears and everything that they needed. You see here, it said that in the 17th and 18th century, if you could read here, it said that in 17th and 18th century, the main weapons in traditional society were the bow, the arrow, and the spear, which everybody could make. So they were, in that sense, democratic weapons. So no man could be a despot for long.
Democratic weapon.
Yeah, no man could be a despot for long where the technology is relatively primitive. So it was only in later times when they now started discovering the guns and whatever they could shoot us. And in fact, we realized that even by that time, they never had a permanent military or policeman as the kingdoms and chiefdoms. So no police officer you could tell, go kill those people and shoot them to respect me. That was not there. So if you want to be a dictator, I'll make my own bow or my own arrow and I'll send you away. So these are few things that we really have to understand, but we must agree that we cannot continue the exit option anymore. Of course, exit option was to threaten the kings to ensure that they bow to the people, but no, we cannot continue that anymore. Just Sister Tapua, if you can be able, just read for us the last part, maybe we can finish with that, then we can maybe think about it a bit for maybe 10 to 15 minutes, then we look forward to the next part when we start the other models. So please go ahead, sister.
Okay. The real causes of despotism in modern times. In general, various factors have conspired to enable despotism to flourish in the developing world in modern times. 1. The unitary system of government. 2. The Western-style multi-party democracy. 3. Means and reach. 4. Other factors such as the Cold War and foreign aid. Nearly all the developing countries were at some point colonies of European powers that bequeathed the unitary system of government to the newly independent countries. The nationalist heroes who endured hardships, indignities, and even jail to bring freedom to their people should have jettisoned that model of government as the Americans did, but they retained it. The unitary system in which all decisions and powers are centralized or concentrated in the capital city may be suitable for homogeneous, single tribe European nations, but it is deeply flawed and fundamentally unsuitable for polyethnic developing nations. Recall that in the larger traditional polities, confederation was the norm. Even kingdoms composed of the same ethnic stock were often confederacies. Sorry, I'm lost, right? In centralizing decision-making and concentrating power at the center, the unitary model of governance increases the threat of despotism exponentially. In fact, despotism will emerge in any political regime that centralizes power and lacks an effective system of checks and balances. Furthermore, concentrating decision-making and power at the center transforms the state into a price or a gold mine. Now, graft onto this system the Western-style multi-party, winner-takes-all gold democracy, and the explosive potential becomes apparent. First, all sorts of groups, ethnic, political, religious, and professional, compete ferociously to capture this pot of gold. And this competition often degenerates into civil war. Naturally, in this competitive sport, the group with the biggest bazooka comes out on top, which explains the reign in the 1970s and 80s of the caudillas in Latin America and military vagabonds in Africa. Second, whoever or which group captures the pot of gold will never relinquish it. One man, one vote came to many African countries one time. And once captured, this centralized power is used to settle old scores, loot the treasury, squash any opposition, and perpetuate oneself in office. Presidents use their power to enrich themselves and their cronies, and to advance the economic and political interests of particular groups, whilst excluding others. The politics of exclusion, or quasi-apartheid. The richest persons in Africa are often heads of states and ministers. Recall that Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir has been accused of siphoning off up to 9 billion of his country's funds and placing it in foreign accounts, according to leaked US diplomatic cables. Also recall that the late General Sani Abacha of Nigeria, General Ibrahim Babangida of Nigeria, the late Felix Houphouët-Boigny of Ivory Coast, and Mobutu Sese Seko, each stole more than the net worth of all 43 US presidents combined, which is 2.7 billion. Why would any head of state want to give up power? With Western-style liberal, multi-party democracy, incumbent despots don't lose elections. To do so would amount to political suicide. Thus, they use every trick, fair and foul, to ensure a win with comfortable margins. Forget about free and fair elections and foreign election observers. President Hamid Karzai stole the November 2009 election right under the noses of NATO forces and the UN observers in Afghanistan. Witnessed the 2009-2010 elections in Bahrain, Burkina Faso, Burundi, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Ivory Coast, and Rwanda. No coconut lost. The international community kids itself, if it thinks the presence of handful of foreign observers can ensure fairness and transparency. In many cases, the elections are stolen even before the foreign observers arrive. The usual trick is to permit a certain number of foreign observers and closet them in five-star hotels in urban areas, then chauffeur them to pre-selected polling stations where voting is conducted peacefully, freely, and fairly. But the skullduggery takes place in rural areas, from which the foreign observers are frightened away with tales of high HIV infection cases, as if it's in the air, nasty men eating crocodiles, and lack of toilet facilities and social amenities. Such was the case in Ghana's 1992 election. A tiny village in northern Ghana with a population of 5,000 managed to cast 54,000 votes for the incumbent regime. Third, the danger of despotism has been enhanced by means and reach. The departing colonialists left behind standing armies, police, and security forces, so that despots have at their disposal a lethal arsenal with awesome firepower and brutally efficient weapons. They can mow down a crowd of thousands in an instant. Improvements in communication and transportation have enormously extended the reach of despots. Witness the brutal crackdown on streets protests in Egypt, Libya, and Tunisia with tanks, helicopters, and fighter jets in February 2011. The crackdowns in Bahrain, Syria, and Yemen were even more vicious. Finally, today's international environment fosters despotism because a despot can easily find foreign patrons. During the Cold War, despots peddled their ideological credentials and secured billions in aid from both the East and the West. Today, they only need to have oil or strategic minerals or profess to be fighting terrorism. Anyone who opposes them is a terrorist, said President Alexander Lukashenko of Belarus in August 2003. Quotation, anyone joining an opposition protest would be treated as a terrorist. We'll wring their necks with one, as one might, oh, that's terrible. We will wring their necks as one might a duck. Similarly, foreign Tunisian President Ben Ali, under siege in January 2011, denounced the street protests against his regime as an act of terrorism.
Sister Tapo, we are stopping it there. We will continue with the rest. It's becoming hotter. So let us allow members to go ahead and share what they think about the text that we are just reading. Anybody want to go first? What do you think about the text? Anybody want to go first? What do you want to point at based on what the author is trying to illustrate here? We have 19 minutes or 20 minutes to end our class. So anybody want to go first on what we have read here in regards to how despotism is working, the what is making despotism possible, as we are being told here, the four means, which is The unitary system of government, Western style of multi-party democracy, means and reach, and other factors. Do you agree with the author? Or what is your thinking in regards to what the author is trying to explain here? Kindly feel free to come in and share with us what you think. Anybody?
Yes.
Yeah, Sawindo, go ahead.
Again, is the instruments of cohesion. You see, when the colonialists leave our countries, they leave the incoming regime with a lot of firepower, improved infrastructure, and our regimes use infrastructures to suppress us and to remain in power. They own the instruments of cohesion, and they cannot be taken out. The caveats that are there to keep them in check, like elections are rigged before time. Before election day come, the results are already determined. So there are basically, in today's time, basically no proper sanctions, or if you say means, to keep these guys in check. They are running free. And we really have to do something. The only way to do something is to dethrone them and to change the constitutions accordingly.
Sawindok.
But we have not braved up enough. Yes.
Do you think if Traore was to go through a democratic election, do you think if Traore was to go through a democratic election, would he have won the presidency of Burkina Faso?
No.
He would never have won, because the elections regime would not have been in his favor.
Very interesting. Of course, sometimes it's an obvious truth, but it makes us to rethink seriously on strategies.
You see, you are bringing me back there. That's why I said in those times there were no chance for coup d'etats. But like Traore has done, instead of a group standing up, a group of youth or group of elders, he has taken the task upon himself and took out the dictator. And if he had to go for elections, as unpopular and unknown as he was, he would not have won, because of the systems that are designed in such a way to keep the incumbent in power.
Sawindok,
Yes.
on this aspect of unitary system of government being a breeding ground for dictatorship, do you support the same assertion? Because remember, they are saying, in fact, many countries were given the unitary central system of government, but even America itself refused the central system of government. That's why they came up with states. Do you think centralizing power into one central government is also a breeding ground for one to be a dictator? What do you think?
Yeah, it's evil. Unitary states are evil. I'm a federalist. I believe in a federalist system where power is decentralized, and you will have to beg for votes from regions in order for them to vote you in power. But if it is a unitary state, one dominant group like the Kikuyu will always be winning, and they will always be the ace card to play.
Okay, thank you. Anyone want to come in, or have you done? Have you finished your thoughts?
Yes, I'm done.
Okay, anybody want to come in? Sister Tapo?
Yes, I'm just coming in on that point of the unitary system of government. I think that's why I'm saying I think we need to sankofa. I think we need to use our traditional leadership that is in place as almost as a, I know I've got certain opinions about this, but almost as a God-elected people who are permanently there and are always going to be accountable to the people. Because accountability is a problem. Because if we're federal and we're then working with people who have got an interest of the people at heart, then I think we would have solved the multi-party system problem, because the multi-party system problem does not work for us. It doesn't protect us at all. It's something that we just need to forget about and put something else in place. And if we do that, then we then solve the problem of means and reach. Because what we have is, I think the author of this article was being polite, because the means and reach is just maintaining perpetual colonization from a distance. And that we need to get rid of. So I am advocating for going back to a system where we've got communities that are smaller and easier to manage, that are given a budget and work to protect that budget, which is why I think Africa needs to work as one country. And then we've got people protecting the interests of specific areas. Thank you. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you. Brother Sadiki, what do you think?
I think the consciousness of the individual that shows black love is the true uh, uh, structure we could find in someone who's going to lead our people to some kind of liberation. You can find the passion in the individual, those who are looking forward to take over some type of leadership. President Ibrahim Traoré exemplifies that. He shows he's coming from a village mentality, and he's recognizing the struggle of his people by heart, and the people sees that. He prepared himself militarily, educationally wise, just as well, because he has a degree and something. But he, as you notice, he's always have quoting something of a revolutionary or a nationalist, you know. So he didn't just go into this coup and to jump out there and not really be prepared for this responsibility. So we must go back to our ancestral chiefdoms and queendoms at the time in which the structure of the people was a concern. The village, that village structure should be the concern or the practice that we should have. Because once we got exposed to this white man's democratic structure of politics, has destroyed our whole identification as a people that had true love and concern for the struggles for their people. As soon as we switched off, we didn't actually we were actually conquered to practice these ways because we've never been able to overcome and go back to our system of a village lifestyle, and the input of creating changes within our own community. There's been many things that, from us being conquered, has stopped us from progressing. Our political structure, our social system, everything is based on how we had to compromise because we've never gained that strength. This is a period of time in which my observation, the best thing has ever happened is what is happening in the Sahel. So I think they're going to believe. I believe that the structure that they're under is community-based, village-based, people-centered, next generational progress. That's my opinion of this whole scenario. The conversation or the author's message. From what I understand, I don't have the literature in front of me, so I can't really follow it to that point. I'm just throwing out a general statement. Peace.
Thank you, peace, brother. Thank you for that. General Lucky, what do you think?
Yes, my lord, keep thanks. Yeah, I agree with Elder there, Elder WHK. Yeah, everything of Africa, it needs a centralized governance, no matter how we want it, because without a central governance, we're going to have too many independent chiefdoms then it will be difficult for us to fight a common enemy. That's how they conquered South Africa. The Goonies, Xhosas, the Zulus, the Ndebeles, the Vendas, they are all one people, but who had different kingdoms. So when the British came, they attacked them one by one. And then when Shaka, the so-called Shaka, because that Shaka is not his real name, Uskiti, when he find out that, hey, the whites are ganging up on us, and he tried to collect the other Nguni kings and kingdoms, mistakenly called Mfecane, then it was already too late because, but we're not going to go into that detail. But anyway, my point I'm trying to raise is that without a central confederacy, you see, we are vulnerable to outside of African continent. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody wants to come in before I go ahead?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Sorry about that. I'm coming in with the pot of gold, the price, because in ancient societies, like my sister Chisomo said, being a king or a chief was not a way of getting rich. And like the text says, when we won our independence, instead of reinstating our ways of governance, where you did not get into it to be rich, they've started running away with the pot of gold. And I think that's where we're losing it. This is why I was saying we need people who are not focused on accumulating wealth, which is why Traore, for example, when he declared his own wealth, I think it was 100 something thousand US dollars compared to all the other riches that everybody else has. So we need to find a way of making sure that this role is not attractive. It attracts the right people. It attracts people who have people at heart, who are there to organize the people and do things for the people, not for themselves. Because it's just wrong, absolutely wrong. Because I mean, you see all the list of all the leaders and how much they accumulated. And you match that compared to 43 US presidents combined over a period of time. And we're just siphoning away. I think we've just lost it. We really need to go back. Because we can't fight a system and then be the white people in that old system. It doesn't work. It doesn't at all. Anyway, I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you. Having a comrade who is trying also to compete to contribute to the discussion. Sorry for that. But yes, what I'll say is that one is that it's very interesting how the Western multi-party system cannot work for us. And the author is saying very well that it cannot work. It can only work on a homogenic society, but not in our pluralistic society where we have so many ethnic groupings. Because now, when it works in our society, the so-called democracy, it cannot be applied to us. It cannot apply in a unitary society, but when you have so many communities, there's a competition about the communities and about those people who want to enrich themselves within the community. So that's the biggest problem we are facing. And I think this issue of winner take it all, and the question is very clear. If they are amassing all that wealth, you just imagine that some few of them are amassing what 43 presidents of US have. The question you ask, why will the head of state want to give up that power? In fact, many people who want to retain power today, it's not that they have any agenda to do for us. But the key issue is they don't want to leave the loots they have made from their countries. And if they leave, they ensure that they bring their next puppet. So that's a rotating chain. President Ruto became a president. He could not go after the loot that was stolen by Kenyatta family and even Uhuru Kenyatta, the former president himself. And they never went for the loot that were taken by President Moi. So these are groups that want to continue retaining their systems. And it's very important also what is being said that no coconut lost any election. You see? And it's also very important what they say that with the Western system, liberal multi-party democracy, incumbent despots don't lose election. To do so is amounting to political suicide. So it's very interesting. We are being put to a system that cannot work, but we are subjected to see it work. And you see what they always say, that there are those observers and observers who observe. You see what a story they're being given. Oh, there's HIV infection, there's nasty eating people, crocodile, there are no amenities and nonsense. Then you come and write reports. So this aspect of a state in Ghana that give from 5,000 voters, get us 54,000 voters, has happened even in my country several times. They even polling stations that do not exist, but they report votes. So I think we really need to rethink, if you have to get out of despotism, how will you defeat these four factors? These factors of the Western multi-party system, the central government system, and even this means and reach that the governments are having. So we really need to think about this. In the next time we see what you can do about it. But so far, that's the end of our session for today. We look forward to continue this from our next session. Thank you very much for your time, comrades.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Peace,
Good night.
brother. Stay strong. Stay black.
Thank you.
Stay strong, stay black always, brother. Happy to see you here. Looking forward to see you.
I see you got something busy with you right there.
Yeah, this comrade is trying to contribute to the conversation.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. I know you're gonna be a true intellect.
Yeah. So,
Hey
yeah.
man, you know me. You know you.